Hey, everybody, I'm back. This is Morgan Ortagus on the first show of the Morgan Ortagus Show. I'm incredibly excited to have someone that I have known actually most of my adult life, someone that I met very, very early in politics, and that is the senior senator from the state of Florida, Marco Rubio. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you. Don't make me feel old, but congratulations on the show. And you're right. We met when I was in the state legislature, which was a while back. And I don't think you'd even graduated high school yet, or maybe you had just graduated high school.
No,
But
I had just graduated college. Thank you for making me feel
college, all
younger,
right.
too. I had just graduated college, and I think that you are on your way to being Speaker of the State House in Florida. And man, have things changed since then. But you still look the same somehow. You never age.
I don't know about that, but I appreciate you thinking that and saying that to all of your big audience. And congratulations on the show. I'm so excited for you. I'm glad that you're going to be a voice out there explaining the rapidly changing, dangerous, and complicated world, because I think it's something we really need to spend more time focused on.
One of the things that, one of the reasons that I supported you in your primary against Charlie Crist when you first ran for the Senate, and everybody kind of thought you and I and everyone supporting you were a little crazy because he was a Republican governor, popular at the time. But I knew that you would be so good on foreign policy and so good on the issues that I cared about. And I'm so glad we did that. But, the biggest thing that we're talking about on this show today, Senator, is, of course, what has happened in Israel since October 7th. And Americans sometimes forget that it is not just over 1,200 Israelis were killed, but we know over 30, 32, 33 Americans so far that we know that were killed. We still have Americans left behind, at least 8 Americans that we know are being held hostage by a terrorist group, by Hamas. But I noticed one of the things that you did recently that was really impactful is you organized a screening of the October 7th footage for other senators so they could know and see for themselves exactly what went on that day. Can you describe what that screening was like?
Well, frankly, and unfortunately, I guess in some ways, but maybe not, for the following reason, because it's important for people to know what happened that day. A lot of the stuff that was on there was stuff that has been out there in the media, some of it censored, social media and the like. There were some things no one had ever seen. But I want to tell you that one part, and maybe for someone who hadn't watched any of these videos in the past, there were other parts of it that were obviously very disturbing. But there was one part in particular, which I think I can talk about without betraying any of the confidences they put in us when we watch it. And that is of one of these Hamas killers calling back home to his parents. And he's talking to his mother and he's talking to his father and he's bragging about how many Jews he had just killed with his own hands. And he's almost crying, but not, it was tears of joy, right? He's joyful at how proud I would say it's a lot like somebody calling their parents to tell them, hey, I just got hired, or I just got into the law school I wanted to go to, or I just scored a 1,500 on the SAT. Aren't you proud of me? And you can hear his mother in the background weeping out of joy, and you can hear the pride in his father's voice. In essence, this guy calling back to tell his parents, your son is a hero. Your son is a hero. He just murdered, I don't know what the number was, 5 or 6 Jews with his own hands. And I think this gives you insight into what we are dealing with here. Okay, we are not dealing with people that are fighting for land. We're not dealing with people that are fighting for sovereignty or any of these other things. We are dealing with people that are fighting because they want to just kill or drive out from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea every Jew that lives in that part of the world. I mean, in Israel, that's what they want. They want to destroy Israel as a Jewish state, and they want every Jew to leave or die. That in their mind, that justifies the killing of anyone who's Jewish. And even if you're not Jewish and you happen to be in that house, because they kill people that weren't Jewish as part of this attack too, it justifies all of it, and includes their own death, by the way. It's something to be celebrated. So, and that's what we're dealing with. That's the mentality that we are dealing with here. And I think it's important for us to understand now why Israel cannot allow a group like that to continue to have rockets and the capabilities, not just to do what they did on October 7th, but to take any sort of action against them in the future. You just can't coexist with an element like that.
That's right. One of the things that we hear when you talk about the Palestinians and Hamas, and of course our heart breaks for any innocent life. And you don't want children on either side of the conflict, innocent children, innocent women, children to be killed. But one of the criticisms that you continue to hear from some of your more left-leaning colleagues in the Senate and in the House is that there needs to be a ceasefire because too many innocent Palestinians are being killed. How do you answer that when that criticism is leveled against Israel?
I think that children and innocents and people who are not combatants being killed is always horrible. The question is whose fault it is. And the fault of it belongs to Hamas, because Hamas deliberately, and they've done this for a long time, and so does Hezbollah and others, but Hamas in particular, they put their military objectives, meaning their weapons, their rocket launchers, they deliberately put these things on top of schools and daycare centers and nurseries and hospitals, and they build their tunnels, and they hold people there, and they do it on purpose. They use innocents as human shields for both propaganda purposes and because they believe that that protects them in some way. So they're responsible for this. The other reason why they're responsible for it is, they knew what was going to happen when they crossed the border and they carried out the slaughter. They knew Israel was going to respond forcefully. They didn't care. They don't care. Right. In their view, if you die, if you are an innocent and you are killed, you represent two things for Hamas. Number one, a propaganda opportunity. And number two, they're martyrs. Because in the end, if you die by an Israeli attack, in their mindset, you're a martyr and it's a glorious thing. If they're willing to die themselves, why would they not be willing to have others die? So I think it's their fault. What I know for a fact is the Israelis are not saying, let's go out and kill as many civilians or as innocents as we can. They are not deliberately looking to inflict damage on those people. But they are attacking military objectives, which under the laws of war, as agreed to and ratified by almost every nation on earth, if you turn a hospital into a military facility, it becomes a legitimate target. And that's what Hamas has done. And I think the Israelis have gone about as far as you can go in a conflict like this of warning people of what's going to happen. And there'd be a lot more people dead if Hamas was the one carrying out these attacks, that's for certain. But I think it's horrible that innocents are dying, and I think Hamas is 100% to blame for it.
Yeah. Well, I just want to thank you too. It has been so hard as a parent of a Jewish child to see what's going on in the United States. And there's been some viral videos of you standing up for the Jewish people, standing up for Americans and Israelis that were killed on that day. And it means so much to so many of us to know that you are standing with us and that we have a friend and that we have an ally. One of the great things about this show, Senator, is that we're going around the world and we're talking about conflicts around the world. And you certainly have that expertise on the Foreign Affairs Committee. When I was in the Trump administration, we heavily sanctioned Venezuela. We worked closely with you on Maduro. And I just thought maybe it would be, because you have such an expertise here, there's so much going on in the Middle East that our audience may not actually know what's happening in Venezuela right now. Can you give us a quick recap and also what you and I are doing, both calling on the Biden administration to reinstate those sanctions against Maduro?
Yeah, so Maduro is a dictator, right? I mean, they have fake elections. He took power. He's basically about a third of the country has left. So he has driven and created a mass migration crisis. Venezuelans now on any given day are the largest group of people crossing our border, all of it driven by him and what he did to this country. We're talking about a wealthy country. It has oil reserves and the like. It all started under Hugo Chavez. It's continued under Maduro. But there's other aspects of Maduro that we need to know. Maduro is also heavily aligned with Iran. He buys weaponry from Iran. He helps Iran evade sanctions. They help each other in oil sales and in the transfer of that. He's deeply aligned with the Iranians. And we have to expect their cooperation goes even deeper than that in terms of providing IRGC elements, the terrorists and the like, the passport services and things of this nature to allow them to travel and evade being detected as they move around the hemisphere. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that Iranian operatives bombed the Jewish center in Argentina. And so we know they're active in the Western Hemisphere. And so the Trump administration rightfully sanctioned them. So what does the Biden administration do? The Biden administration comes in and immediately looks for ways that it can alleviate those sanctions because they have people in that administration, okay, that are in charge of Western Hemisphere policy that sympathize with every leftist element, including the Maduro regime. And so we now live in a world, unfortunately, where we have an administration that mistreats allies. So you have Bukele in El Salvador, who wants to be friendly to America. We mistreat him. We mistreat the Dominican Republic. We mistreat, leaders of countries that want to be pro-American. Those guys are the guys we do sanction or we do travel advisories against or we condemn or we have our embassies talking bad about them. But then we are desperate to cut deals with Venezuela, to buy more oil. And that's the other thing that's ironic. Like the only oil company, the Green New Deal people in the administration and Congress, they're more than happy to sanction every oil company in the world. They want to wipe out fossil fuels, but they want to buy more of those from an enemy of the United States and Venezuela. So it's nonsensical, and I think has given the Maduro people, they just cut a deal, they just signed a deal that Biden agreed to lift some sanctions in return for them doing open and free elections. Within 2 weeks of that, he has basically not just suspended the opposing party and the leading candidate against him for president, he's now threatening to put her in jail. So to me, that's a de facto violation of the deal, and the Biden people aren't going to do anything about it because in their mind, they want this guy's oil into the global market. So they don't want to produce more here. They want to buy more from there so they can take credit for gas prices stabilizing or going lower so he can get reelected. But they can also say, but we didn't allow any more drilling in America, so they can make their radical environmentalist people happy. So it's just really, but it's dangerous. It signals weakness. And so the latest is now, they have this, Venezuela has this border dispute with Guyana, and they're starting to position troops on the border. I don't know if you'll see a full-scale invasion, but I have no doubt you're going to see multiple military provocations over this border dispute because it's a region that just discovered a lot of oil. And Guyana has just issued leases to develop that oil. And so now Venezuela wants to go in with military force or at least create enough controversy over it that these companies will back out of the leases. And it'll be a real test to see if the Biden administration just stands by and does nothing. The last time they threatened to do that, the Trump administration deployed naval assets off the coast of Venezuela, and that all died down pretty quickly. I don't think you're going to see that from this guy.
No, you probably won't see that from this administration. And that's a good point, Senator Rubio. I think that it's sort of variations on a theme. And what do I mean by that? We saw, for example, the Biden administration just mere weeks into their presidency, they removed the designation of the Houthis, which are in Yemen, which is yet another Iran-supported back group. Removed the foreign terrorist designation from them for nothing, right? It's not like they did a negotiation. Similar Iran, right? They have not been enforcing sanctions for 3 years. Iran is at least $80 billion richer from oil revenues because they have not enforced the sanctions. And then you look at Venezuela, again, the Biden administration lifting sanctions there. And what do these people do? What do these leaders of these countries do? Well, it's not like they do things that are in the best interest of the United States or what we would want them to do. No, you see Iran funding terrorism, funding the very attacks that killed Americans and Israelis on October 7th. You see Maduro, lacks sanctions relief. What does he do? Trying to take over a neighbor. So, I don't know, at what point they're going to wake up and realize that these policies that they've pursued was a sort of this reaction. The orange man is bad, and therefore anything that the orange man did around the world, I'm going to replace. It sounds overly simplistic, but I think that's been their guiding principle.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, part of it is this sort of career bureaucracy diplomats that, either sympathize with these groups or always just automatically feel guilty about American power and influence. And so their automatic reaction to everything is to sort of say, whatever America does, whatever's in our interest, we shouldn't be for it. It's a pathology I don't fully understand, but it exists in our foreign service, unfortunately, among some. So part of it is that, and then part of it is what you just said. If Trump was for it, I'm against it. And that's sort of that's what they've done on the border, which is why we're being flooded. And that's what they've done in the Middle East. So Yemen's a great example. That's where the Houthis are. Yemen has no economy. The Houthis have no economy. How do they have guided weaponry? I'm not talking, they're not just launching crazy bombs. I mean, these are guided munitions, particularly guided unarmed aerial vehicles, UAVs, drones. And
ballistic missiles.
Weaponry. Yeah, and ballistic missiles that can reach the sea, okay? And where do they get this from? They didn't buy this at Best Buy. I mean, they didn't get it from Amazon.
Right.
These are Iranian weapons. These are made by Iranians, made by Iran, provided by Iran, not just to the Houthis, not just to Hamas, but to Hezbollah and to multiple groups inside of Iraq and Syria. On this very morning or overnight, our embassy in Baghdad faced a barrage of missile attacks, all using Iranian weaponry. They call them Iranian proxy groups, but they're in name only. They are controlled by the IRGC. They are controlled by Iran. They are directed by Iran. They attack if Iran tells them to attack. They stand down if Iran tells them to stand down. They attack where Iran tells them to attack, and they attack with weapons provided by Iran. So these are Iranian attacks and it's because they think they can get away with it. When Trump was president, they were afraid of him. I mean, it's simple as that.
Right.
I mean, they saw the Soleimani strike, and they were freaked out by it. They felt like this is a guy we don't want to mess with. They're not afraid of Joe Biden. And it's not a coincidence that 5 months after what happened in Afghanistan, you see this invasion of Ukraine, because he has signaled weakness and inept, and it encourages adversaries to take action.
I couldn't agree with you more. Listen, I've taken up a lot of your time, but I can't let you leave without talking to you about China, because you were one of the earliest voices sounding the alarm on the threat of the Chinese Communist Party, the danger that the U.S. faced. You and President Trump were really two of the early voices on this. I've got some information coming out with the Hudson Institute in the next few weeks, where we're looking at the corporations in America that are not just selling a widget to China, because that's fine, right? We as a U.S. government encourage trade to China for the last 20 or 30 years. So we're not talking about simple business. We're talking about business that goes beyond the pale, right? Business with the PLA, with the People's Liberation Army, business that would be detrimental to the security of the United States. And you have companies like McKinsey, a consulting firm. You have financial companies, major funds in the United States, essentially investing in the defense and security establishment in China. Can you tell us what you are doing in the Congress to fight against those companies, American companies that are working against the best interest of the United States?
Well, a couple things. The first is that we need to continue to increase the list of products that we should not allow sale to China on, because it's not simply selling them rockets and missiles and stuff like that. I mean, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about everything from genetic information, the kits you need, because we know what they use genetic information for. They're using it to not just beat us in precision medicine, but potentially design weaponry that kills people of a certain genetic makeup. To technology or even components of technology that allow them to reverse engineer it and create capacities in their military space. Everything in China is fused between the military and the commercial. There is no distinction between the two. Everything in China, by their law, have to work together. And the best way to understand China is Xi Jinping believes that it is inevitable that China is going to be the world's greatest power. He views the United States as a great power in decline and in collapse. He feels like we're in late state capitalism. Our culture is collapsing. He believes that eventually there is going to be a big economic and commercial conflict with the U.S. and potentially military one. He probably doesn't want one yet. He tries to avoid that as long as possible until they're ready. They don't think they're ready for that kind of conflict yet, but they're building towards it, which is why each day they try to become less dependent on us for everything and anything they can. But ultimately, he believes that the world is going to reach a point, probably sooner than he had anticipated, where China will be the most powerful country in the world and America will not be, and that he will replace us, and that the world order will be a world order that China is good for China and that China can control and dominate to their benefit, to our expense. That's how he views it. And frankly, we need to wake up to that reality in everything we do. We can't depend on them for 88% of our generic medicines. We can't continue to depend on them for rare earth minerals. We can't continue to depend on them for solar, for batteries, either for solar panels or for these electric batteries. That they're going to put all this money into electric cars so the Chinese can then we can become even more dependent on them for the batteries and for the charging stations. So there's a lot to unpack there. But the bottom line is we need to decide, do we want to live in a world where China is the most powerful country in the world and can tell us what to do? Because if we don't, then we need to get to work, and we need to take this seriously, because they have a plan to do it, and we don't have a plan to reverse that or stop it. We need to change that.
Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on the launch of the Morgan Ortagus Show. We are going to go around the world, as I just did with the senior senator from Florida, Marco Rubio, my good friend. We are just so lucky to have you in the Senate. And thank you for taking the time to explain the Middle East, Venezuela, China with our listeners. Thank you so much, Senator.
Hey, thank you again. Congrats on the show. I look forward to coming back.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. This is Morgan Ortagus. We'll be back to you soon.